What's up, BeatStars community? It's your boy Turning Cal checking back in. And today, I'm super excited for everyone that has joined. I want to tell everybody, happy holidays. And I think it's super important that we're having this because I've been seeing a lot of updates, a lot of different things about, entities, right? I get a lot of questions. People hit me up, hey, man, could you help me think about this LLC? What about a corporation? What about this? What about that? So, I think it's really, really important that, we talk about, LLCs and corporations. So I just want to give a shout out to the people that we got jumped in. Let's see who we got. Beats by Kilo Productions. This is the, excuse me, this is the one I've been waiting for. I've been thinking long and hard about getting my LLC for my music podcast company. I'm starting to think I should separate the two and have an umbrella company at the top. So that's super cool because that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, right? Like understanding, what the LLC is, what the corporation is, and being able to determine what to use, when to use, and also when you're thinking about, what each one is, does it make sense to have multiple? How do you put it all together to make sure that you're prepared and you're legally protected? So we'll jump in and talk a little bit about that. We also have This Is Clutch. We got Classy Beats. This is Clutch. Can't wait for this one. We got Boofa on the beat. Let's go. We got G Life Beats. What's up, Attorney Cal? And man, you're very, very welcome. So without further ado, we can pull our slides up and we can just kind of get into it. And we'll talk a little bit more about, everything. Also, too, I'm actually looking at it right now. So if you want to kind of follow along with what I have, I'm using the guide. You can go to beatstars.world / protect your art. And what that'll do is it'll help you be along with what we're talking about. So the first thing I want to jump into is, okay, the last couple of times we've been talking about, we had to protect my intellectual property recap. So what that recap was, we've been talking about a whole bunch of stuff, right? Copyrights, trademarks, exclusive and non-exclusive licenses, right? Attorneys, lawyers, managers, right? Agents, all of these different things as far as like making sure that you're protected, making sure that you're understanding your value, making sure that you're kind of grasping the things that's going on in the industry on the business side, and from a legal perspective, right? So definitely go back and check out, that last thing. This is a clip. We're not going to play it, but this is a clip where I talked about registering intellectual property. I want to make sure that I plug in, our affiliate partnership we have with Cosign, that's COSYND.com. If you're looking to register your copyrights or your intellectual property, they have really, really great deals on that. And we're also going to have someone from Cosign come speak to us. We'll do like a recap episode talking about how to protect and register your intellectual property. We can go to the next slide. Let's see who else we got. Home Run Productions, what's good? So for the protecting my intellectual property recap, what we talked about, and these is again some of the previous topics, we kind of put all of our topics in one thing, and we talked about intellectual property, right? Types of IP, valuing your IP, protecting your IP, patents, copyrights, trademarks, registering and monitoring copyrights, registering and monetizing trademarks, register monetizing in the power of music publishing, sound recordings, the terms you should include in your agreement, most important agreements you should know, record labels, and music publishers. And we also talked about lawyers, managers, and agents. So if any of them topics interest you, definitely go to our YouTube, definitely go to our Twitch, and check out those videos so you can kind of get up to speed, because everything we're doing is just building on what we learned previously. So we can go to the next slide. All right, so today we're going to be talking about understanding LLCs and corporations. Now, this topic for me is, not only is it a really, really fantastic beats, what's going on? That boy Butter, what's going on? Not only is it a fun topic for me, but this is something that I think will be very, very beneficial for you all, because a lot of times when I'm doing, agreements or seeing agreements, I see producers, I see artists, I see a lot of people doing things in their personal name, right? And you know, to me, if I was an artist or if I was a producer, I would be making sure that everything I did was done in a legal entity, right? Because you want to be protected. So here, I just put, a couple things, right? Pictures, LLC, corporation, and some of my favorite LLCs or corporations, right? So we got Slaughter Gang LLC. So when you go to 21 Savage's, his Spotify, his Apple Music, at the end, when you scroll all the way to the bottom, you will see his LLC name, right? So he's doing business in his company as a company. Then you got PG Lane, you got Rock Nation, you got Good Music, you got EXO, you have Boominati, you have 1400, which is Trippie Redd, and you have Dreamville. So these are some of the really, really cool companies. They all have their logos and they're all branding and doing these different things. So, you know, as far as, LLCs and corporations go, I think the most important thing here, we'll talk a little bit more about it going forward. But the most important thing here is we have to start realizing that not only are, we're artists or we're producers or whatever we consider ourselves, but you all are businesses, right? Like you're entities, like you're not just an individual that's trying to make it, but you're building a brand and you're building a company. So with that being said, we have to think about our individual brands as organizations, right? So you got an organization. Okay, this organization needs to do this. We need distribution. We need publishing. We need PR. We need, marketing. We need legal. We need accounting. We need all of these different things. But one of the benefits of having one of these legal entities is they put you in a place where not only are you protected, but when you're doing business and you're signing stuff and you're taking taking on all the opportunities that you're given, you're able to basically look more professional. You're able to be more protected. And we're going to talk about which one of these entities are these entities as it pertains to protecting yourself. But like, what do they do? What are they, right? And if you have questions, make sure you ask because this is really, really important. So we can jump into the next slide. Okay, BeatStars, right? The purpose of Protect Your Art. The purpose of this course is to introduce students to the legal, business, and creative aspects of the entertainment industry. Entertainment law consists of a broad array of core legal issues combined with the relationship issues that relate to producing and protecting entertainment products and talent. Attorney Kyle, what does that mean? When you're thinking about, like we just said, when you're thinking about all the stuff you're doing, throughout the year, right? You're making these beats, you putting it down, like you networking, you're producing, you're doing all of these different things. You dropping tapes, you making videos, you creating content on Instagram. It's important to do that, right? But it's also important to think about, okay, let me set myself up, right? So if I'm a company, right? If I'm a company as an individual, if I'm a brand, I have to make sure I have that proper structure. Okay, where is this money going to? Is this money that I'm making from my craft? Is it going into my personal account or is it going into my business account? When I'm registering all these different things, is it owned by me personally or is it owned by my company? When I'm thinking about getting distribution, is this distribution done through me as a personal individual, or is it done through my company? Like all of these different things are something that you want to consider, and that's more so the purpose of Protect Your Art, just to kind of make you think about these things, kind of do a self-evaluation and see like, okay, am I running things as a business or as a Fortune 500 company would? Because at the end of the day, you're going to have some success if you haven't already had it. And you just want to make sure that when you get to where you're going, you already have things in place. So when people come in and they want to do business with you, they want to talk to you, they want to do contracts, they want to do deals with you. They want to check you out and see if, everything is up to par. You can say, nah, man, this is my LLC. This is my EIN number. This is my bank account right here. This where you can send a wire. This where you can send an invoice, right? So all of these things kind of work together. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit more. We can go to the next one. So again, if you're looking for the handout, that's going to be on beatstars.world/protect-your-art. I'm actually using it here too. And everything that you all use, I use the same thing. So it's no difference at all. So let me see what we got here. So the first thing, why are business entities important to producers and artists? So let's jump in here. So let's say, you're rapper ABC and you're really, really popping, you know what I mean? Like people like you. Or let's say you producer ABC. And like everybody know you, everybody's like, dang man, this guy's so hard. Like his loose is crazy. Like, everything that he's doing is just amazing. You see what I'm saying? And it's just like, but people not messing with you yet. They just kind of watching you grow, right? So you starting to get all these placements. You sign a publishing deal. Now labels coming at you trying to give you a label deal to start a label, right? Now companies are coming to try to sync your stuff into, movies, into film, into television, into commercials, right? Brands are now coming to you and they're trying to get you to do, partnerships, whether it be in cryptocurrency, whether it be you start an NFT, whether it be, Fashion Nova, or I'm just shouting random things. They want to put you in that new hoodie, right? Or festivals, concerts, all these different things could be coming to you at one time. And now that you're hot, you have all of these different tentacles, right? Coming at you, trying to figure out, where am I going to do this deal? How am I going to do this deal, right? And I think one of the reasons why business entities are important for producers and artists is because at a certain point, when you got so many different things that you're doing, it's hard to make sure that you're legally protected. It's hard to make sure that, okay, I did this brand deal over here, but this company took all these people's money and now they're gone. So my name is on this too. So now when the company gets sued, they're suing me, right? So, oh, I did this distribution deal over here, but man, something happened with, this loop, or something happened with, one of these instruments that I put on here. I didn't know I couldn't use that. So now people are coming at me personally. You know what I mean? And I think what entities do, right? What entities help you do is they put you in a position to where you can do two things. One, you can simplify your business and say, okay, this is my LLC, this is my corporation, and everything that I do that relates to distribution, publishing, merch, touring, brand deals, syncs, all of that stuff is going to be run through here. And then at a certain point, when you get more complex, you might say, okay, I'm going to use this company to do distribution. I'm going to use this company to do touring, this company to do merchandise, this company to do brand deals. But starting out, as a producer, as an artist, you want to make sure that you just have some form of legal protection, right? To make sure that you're good to go. Now, another reason why this is important is because when you think about a business entity, right? A business entity is essentially like an individual, right? They can do everything an individual can do. They can start a bank account, they can buy a car, they can file taxes, they can do a lot of different things. But one of the things that business entities does, it separates the individual, right? It separates us as an individual from our business. So for example, say Attorney Kyle, during the day, I'm an attorney. And let's just say I get paid every day. And every time I get paid, that money hit my bank account, my Attorney Kyle bank account, just as an individual. But let's just say over here at night, I'm a referee. Or let's say over at night, I'm cooking up beats on the side. You know what I mean? Because I'm trying to make it work. So when I'm cooking up beats on the side, I think it's important that everything I do over here, my job, does not affect my beats on the side, right? So for example, if somebody come at me personally, say I get into a car accident, right? Say I get into a car accident and I'm in that accident and it's just something random happens. Now, when I'm sued, right, all of this stuff that I'm making for my job and everything that I'm making over here for my producer stuff can be tapped, right? It can all be looked at and say, okay, I could take all of this from you. Now, say the same thing happens, but instead, when I'm over here, I have my personal account, right, with all of my money from me being a person, like just all my work stuff comes, and then all of my stuff from me being a referee, me being a producer, me being an artist is all in my business account. Once the accident happens, they can't get anything over here, right? Or let's just say something happens over here with me being a producer or artist. Someone sues me, they're mad, they're hating because y'all going up, right? Anything that happens over there, with this, they can only get what's in this business account if you're doing everything right, and they can't attack what you do at your day job. So really, these entities are important because they keep things separate for you, and they make it so that you know exactly in what, in what spirit are you coming in when you're doing business. Okay, in this business, me as a person, this is here. But in this thing, I'm moving as an LLC. Everything's done as through an LLC or a corporation. So that's super important to think about. It really just helps you identify like what you're trying to do, and it helps you identify, right? It helps you identify and make sure you understand it. Okay, this is me in a personal as a person, and this is me as a business. So always think about that when you're doing these deals, when you're doing you signing all this stuff. What are you doing as a person, and where are you jumping into your producer as in your artist bag, and you're doing this all for your music business? And if you're doing something in your music business, it's always smart to think about, okay, let me do this as an entity. Next thing, what is an LLC? So let's talk about an LLC. An LLC, a limited liability company, is a business structure that protects its owners from personal responsibilities for its debts, liabilities. Limited liability companies are hybrids, entities that combine the characteristics of a corporation with those of a partnership or a sole proprietorship. So let's break that down. Attorney Kyle, tell me in 2 sentences what an LLC. A limited liability company is basically a hybrid entity that's protecting you. So when you're going out and you're doing, like we just said, you're going out and you're doing business and you're doing all these different things, you're basically putting this business in front, and you're not signing on the dotted line, so that you're not being the person like, okay, if something happens, this was done as an LLC. This is not done as Attorney Kyle, right? So there's a difference between Attorney Kyle and Attorney Kyle LLC. Now let's talk about this. When we see all of those companies that we saw previously, right? And people want to start labels, right? Say they want to start labels, or they want to start a publishing company, or they want to start anything. They're not starting this stuff and signing on a dotted line in their personal name. No, they're starting LLCs and they're starting corporations, and they're signing these LLCs and these corporations on a dotted line. And then they're making sure that all of these things that are ran through the LLCs or corporation is identified and say, look, these are actions of my LLC, these are actions of my corporation, and this is who you're doing business with. So that's all the LLC does. A corporation, right? Let's talk about a corporation. A corporation is a legal entity that is separate and distinct from its owners. Under law, a corporation possesses many of the same rights and responsibilities as individuals. They enter into contracts, they loan and borrow money, they can be sued, and they can sue. They hire employees, own assets, and pay taxes. Now, we already talked about that. So the main difference when you're thinking about an LLC and a corporation is an LLC, you can start an LLC, you can go online, you can look for your number. I guess what you want to do is you just look at your state and say, okay, I'm in the state of Florida, I'm in the state of Georgia, whatever state that you're in, and then you just type it in. Okay, this is my LLC, and they'll tell you how to register and do everything. Same thing with a corporation. You go to, typically it's called like SOS something, but you could just type in business and it'll tell you exactly where to go and where to look. And at that point, you can register. But the difference between an LLC and a corporation is an LLC typically has what's called members or member managers, right? Or managers, right? These are the people that are in control of the assets that's owned by the LLC. So for example, say you have an LLC, and when you go and you register all your copyrights, right? You put your copyrights in the name of the LLC. All of the members and managers of the LLC now control those assets. Say you go out and you like, okay, my LLC booming now. I'm finna buy a jet because I got to get to all these different places. The members and the managers own the asset of that jet, right? Say you go out and you like, okay, I just got this distribution deal, right? For $5 million. You go get this $5 million distribution deal in the name of your LLC, and now the LLC controls that, and that goes to the LLC bank account. Now, the difference between that, an LLC and a corporation, is a corporation, right? A corporation has what's called shareholders. So I'm pretty sure you all know that, right? A corporation has shareholders. And what those shareholders do, they typically are the ones that invest into the beginning of the corporation. And then they hold shares in the corporation based on the value of that corporation. So, for example, say you start a corporation and you issue 100 shares, right? So, if someone invests 25, if the shares are a dollar, and someone says, okay, I'm gonna put $25 up, then they will own 25% of that corporation. And then, based on how many shares you purchase, your basic or shares you're giving, you own a specific part of that corporation, right? So that's the difference. The LLC has managers, right? Member managers or just members. And your corporation has typically shareholders, right? And it varies slightly based on what state you're in, but for the most part, that's synonymous. Let's see what questions we got here. I heard movies open an LLC for each movie they make. Yeah, I mean that's super true, and you see it a lot of times. And a lot of times, what I do is I just look at like, man, what are they doing business as? Like, it took me a long time to even know like Google was an LLC, all right? But Google is an LLC, but then they have Alphabet, which is the parent company, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So yeah, when people buy real estate, right, they have an LLC for each property they buy a lot of times. So you'll see House One LLC, House Two, just to keep everything super separate. Excuse me. At what point should you begin an LLC? I'm sure once some sort of monthly quota is hit with beat sales, then it's maybe smart to get one. Just not sure when that would be. So, in my opinion, um, this is a great question, and we kind of talk a lot about this, as it pertains, to copyrights, because everyone's like, man, what, like, when should I copyright my beat? I feel like right? You know exactly when it's time to get that LLC or that corporation. But in my opinion, it's never too early to get one. Most times it's too late, right? Because you go in and you look and you say, okay, how much is it going to cost? Now you have to do the cost. Okay, look at how much it's going to cost. Go in and just check and say, all right, for this state, for example, for Florida, like I'm in Florida, right? Typically a LLC, I want to say, is it should be like $50, $50 to $100, and then every month you pay $138, right? But if I'm doing over $1,000 in business and I'm dealing with a bunch of clients and I'm dealing with a bunch of people going back and forth, then it's smart for me to have some type of legal protection, because if anything goes wrong, not only am I protecting myself individually, but I'm also protecting those assets and all the different things that I'm acquiring outside of that business, right? So it's really up to you. Definitely go in and look in your particular state to see if it makes financial sense. Like, I looked at something the other day, and I was like, man, it costs, I think it's like $800 or something like that in California. California has really, really expensive companies and like corporations and business entities. But if you're doing, like you just said, a movie studio, or if you have a company that's generating thousands and thousands of dollars and you're doing a lot of different transactions with a lot of different people, and you're seeing that one of the biggest issues that's in the music industry right now is copyright, right? And we talk about this a lot, but a lot of times people get sued for copyright things they don't even know about, right? Someone uses a loop, you buy a beat and you rap on that beat, and it's just like the producer, something will happen to the beat that the producer got. Or as a producer, you collab with an artist and you find out that the artist, the lyrics that they put on this wasn't even their lyrics, or that the artist says a lyric that belongs to a songwriter from 1970s, and now you're like, man, how am I even protected? The way that you're protected here is if you have that LLC, if you have that corporation, and that business entity did, it contracted with that particular songwriter, or it contracted with that producer. If you were ever in any legal trouble, as long as you're using that entity correctly, you can always say, okay, only thing that you can get here is what's in the LLC, and everything that I have personally is protected, right? So that's just something to think about, especially when you have multiple things that you're working on. Like if you got a regular job, or not even if you have a regular job, but like if you got other things you're interested in or you're doing. Like for example, I got a friend, and his name is Tony Black, right? He was one of the first people that gave me, kind of the game in the music industry on a practical level, because I read a lot of things, I saw a lot of things, I was in school, but like actually getting in there and being hands-on and doing things. One thing that I noticed is he had several businesses, right? He had two barbershops. He had a record label. He had a management company. But one thing he would do is for every entity or new business he started, he would have an LLC. But what I realized is for the cost of that protection, right, it's not really that expensive. And honestly, having an LLC, don't quote me on this, but it's basically like taking out extra insurance to make sure that not only are you protected, but you're professional, right? Because at the end of the day, if it's between me and you and I'm going in there and I'm like, man, send an invoice to Attorney Cal at LLC. You see what I'm saying? Like, I know it may not seem much, but it's just something about having your own entity, and it puts you in a mindset to think like a business instead of thinking like, somebody that's just doing it for fun. The other thing is it's just like in hip hop, right? Or any other genre or whatever. Most of the great brands are companies. Like I was just reading this book called The Last Sultan about Ahmet Ertegun, who started Atlantic Records with the dentist, right? And also with the help of Jerry Wexler. And now he's talking about David Geffen, right? And every time you hear them go on to a new adventure or do something new, it's always a new company, right? So Bad Boy, Death Row, all of these companies, Geffen, Interscope, all of these companies were set up, as business entities, and that's not by mistake, right? So if you see people doing things and it's working for them, there is no reason to reinvent the wheel. But it's obviously a sign to you that these companies, none of the most successful companies are just doing business in the CEO or the owner's personal name. They all have some form of, legal entity that they're using to make sure that they're protected, that their customers are protected, that their employees are protected, the people working with them are protected, and that they have an entity that can live on, right? Because one of the things about business entities as well, which are really cool, is business entities don't die. Now, unless they go bankrupt or you fail to pay the yearly fee, and even after then, you could still use it. But entities last so long, right? So if a human dies, a company can live on. RP Young Dolph, but Young Dolph started Paper Route Empire, right? And you know that's a company, right? That's a business entity, and that business entity likely has artists signed. It likely has publishing things, right? And it likely has all of these different facets, employees, and that entity can live on, especially when you have a great founder that set it up properly, and is generating revenues. So that's super important when you're thinking about how to go up, right? Let's look at what other questions we have. I have a sole proprietorship, which is basically just so I can take payments under my studio name. This is a great question, right? And we're going to talk about what business, and it leads into my next question. What business entities could put you at risk? So, a sole proprietorship. One of the things about a sole proprietorship is it doesn't give you that separation that an LLC or corporation does. So LLC or corporation says this is Attorney Cal, and this is Attorney Cal LLC. This is Attorney Cal. This is Attorney Cal Incorporated. With a sole proprietorship, I'm saying this is Attorney Cal, and this is Attorney Cal. This is his business. So it's good to have, right, to take payments and to do certain things. But the only problem that'll give you potentially is it doesn't give you that legal protection. So if someone sues that sole proprietorship, right, what will happen in that instance is your personal assets will be at risk, right? Your home, your car, your shoes, your clothes, your personal bank account, anything that you own in your personal name, all of that stuff could be at risk, right? But when you have that legal separation, with the LLC or a corporation, what happens is if you get sued, your home, if it's in your personal, your bank accounts, your clothes, your kids' clothes, your wife's clothes, everything that's been purchased by you personally and that's owned by you personally, that's protected. So that's one of the things you're thinking about when you're talking about having a sole proprietorship. I think the other thing to talk about as well is partnerships, right? So when you think about a partnership, a sole proprietorship is just you registering, basically having a business name, but that's being done in your name. A partnership is when two people come together for purposes, say it's the music industry, and they say, man, let's just form a partnership. What happens is with that partnership, the partners take on the debts and the profits based on how much of the business they own. But there's not, again, that legal separation that you're given, between your personal and if you have an LLC and a corporation, right? So always think about that when you're looking at sole proprietorships and you're looking at partnerships. While they are considered to be a business entity and you can go online and register for them, right? If you're dealing with in the music industry, so many moving parts, so many different people, all of these different things, whether it be intellectual property, we're seeing so many different intellectual property disputes now, and having a sole proprietorship or a partnership isn't necessarily what's going to give you the most protection as an individual or help you grow. Let's see the next question. Do employees set themselves up as an LLC to run all their money through? It really depends, right? So if you're LLC, if you're an employee, typically you're just going to get paid, as an individual in your personal name. But if you're an independent contractor, one of the cool things that you can do as an independent contractor, because it's your company, is you can set up your own LLC. You can set up what's called an EIN number, which is the way that you're identified tax-wise, right? And then once you set that up, you can set up a bank account. And now when you're working with people as an independent contractor, you're able to get paid through that bank account and be a functioning business, right? Let's see what we got here. How come people will set up a hierarchy of companies? Great question. So I was just looking at some companies, and the reason why people do this is, let's do this for example. We talked about earlier how as an artist, as a producer, not only do you have your publishing, right? Hopefully you all are signed up to BeatStars Publishing. You got distribution. Hopefully y'all signed up to BeatStars Distribution. Then you may have merch over here. Then you may have touring over here. Then you may have brand deals over here, right? Separate deals, right? So let's just say your overall company is Attorney Cal Incorporated, right? That's what's called a parent company. That's the company that's right at the top. Now, if I'm going out and I think about all of these 5 different things: distribution, publishing, merchandise, licensing, which could be sync, which could be brands, and then let's just say touring, right? Instead of me running everything up into my parent corporation, I can give myself more layers of legal protection. And this is not something that you have to do or you don't have to do. I'm just kind of giving this, this example. So say, for example, something goes down over, my touring is doing really good, right? But something happens with distribution that's causing me problems or potential legal issues. Because I have all these different things separate, right? Whatever happens over here doesn't affect this over here, right? And now my parent company, while it does have ownership in those companies, it's still its own thing, right? So that's all people are doing. They're just creating layers of legal protection and having different entities because they don't want something that's affecting them here to affect them over here, right? And it's important to think about that because if you got all these different businesses going, a lot of times people don't get sued. But we talked about this in my law school class, and it's something I really didn't realize. It was just like the more successful you become, one of the things that people are going to do is try to figure out ways to take your money, right? And lawsuits are some of the main ways that people lose and that people make money. So you have to kind of prepare yourself for that. Can you set up in a different state if you have residents there? This is Miles Got Beats. This way, it could be an attempt to get the best deal to set up an LLC, but still be able to do business anywhere. Yeah, so this is a great question, and really a great point. So if you ever do business with companies, a lot of times, and I'm just sharing this with you all, and we learned this in school. There's just this precedent that has been set in business. It's a legal precedent. It's just like a rule. It's just like like a royalty precedent, right? Like artists typically get this royalty rate because of this. It's just a precedent that's been set, but that's changing, right? Abe just sent something out that said 50% of all people that won Grammys are independent artists, right? So while it was a precedent that you had to be signed to a major or a mid-major or whatever, or signed at all to win a Grammy, that is changing. But here, there's also a precedent as it pertains to business entities. And I'm just sharing this with you all that most corporations are set up in Delaware. And the reason why that is because there's specific laws in Delaware that make it attractive for companies to be corporations, namely because how they look at contracts, right? They look at contracts based on how they're written, right? There's also benefits. Some people like to do stuff in California, in just different states. But one of the things that you are able to do is, I forget what it is. I want to say it may be Mississippi. One of the southern states don't have a yearly fee, right? So I had someone I was talking to, and they had family in Mississippi, but they lived in another state, and it was just like, bro, should I set my LLC up in Mississippi? Because I got family that live in Mississippi, but I live, in this state. In Mississippi, it only costs like $50 or whatever to do my LLC, and there's no annual fee. Right? I could be wrong about this, but I'm just giving y'all an example. But the state I live in, man, it's $900 and the annual fee $300 and this and this. So even if I set my LLC up over here and I have a registered agent here and I'm doing business everywhere, I'm just basically not spending all my money in fees every year. So that's something that you have to consider, because having multiple LLCs, as we said, could definitely get very pricey with the fees if you got to pay taxes, if you have to have certain licenses. So definitely consider that, and that's a truly great question. Let me see. But once you have an LLC, you're probably going to need a CPA to help with or do your taxes, correct? Great question. Yes, Bufo. Having an LLC or having a corporation. So now when you go at the end of the year and it's just like we all have, I'm not endorsing a brand, but everybody typically has like the people that go to the C. Like some people go to H&R Block, some people go to TurboTax, some people go to, I don't know, just these companies. So instead of you going and instead of like, okay, I'm doing my personal taxes at the end of the year, now you're saying, hey, once you do my personal taxes, here's my books for my LLC. This is how much I spend on equipment. This is how much I spend on this. This is how much I spend on that. This is how much I, made. Tell me what advantages I have because I'm an LLC, right? I'm not a tax professional, so I don't know the rates or whatever. But when you're doing your taxes for your LLC or your corporation, basically you're just having that person not only help you with your personal stuff, but you also giving them your business stuff as well. So let me see. I got an email to send they're taking long. So does this mean that my royalties will be Blackbox? To send my IPI number and they're taking long to return it to me. So does this mean that my royalties will be black? Oh, I guess you're asking this question about your royalties and how Blackbox works. I mean, it really depends on how long this is, but typically it takes a while for your stuff to get Blackbox. But if you're having problems with people giving your IPI number, just stay on it, right? So as soon as you get it, you should be fine. Typically, publishing royalties don't come like the next day, so it's kind of hard to get Blackbox. I mean, it takes a year or two, and sometimes it's a while. It takes a while for that to happen. Y'all are asking really great questions too. If an LLC under corporation gets sued, is the corporation liable too? It really depends. All of this is very, very nuanced, because if the corporation was doing stuff along with the LLC, then the corporation and the LLC can get sued. But if it was just the LLC working in its own stead, right, like doing its own thing, and the corporation is just a parent company, um, then at that point it's just like, how can you sue this corporation when it's just this LLC doing business? The corporation hasn't signed on anything. It's not, it's not putting itself out there to be a part of any deal. So it really depends on what stead the corporation is acting in as it pertains to the LLC, and it really depends on how the LLC is, interacting with whoever is suing them. Byron Mines, Blackbox, enlighten me. Great question. So, as SK was saying, what Blackbox royalties are essentially at when you have publishing royalties. Typically, what happens is you have all of these royalties that go unclaimed. So, say you're a writer, and I'm pretty sure, in my opinion, this is probably at least 30 to 40% of writers. I could be wrong. The number could be lower by now with how much information is getting out there. But say you're a writer, and let's say that there's not really many people. Say you're just doing everything, all your recordings, all the things that you put out, you just put them on Spotify, you just put them on Apple Music, you just put them on YouTube, and none of your music or the compositions are being registered. And let's just say you do this for a 3-year period. So all the royalties are being generated on the sound recording or from Spotify, YouTube. But there's all these publishing royalties that the companies or the DSPs, when they pay these funds out, there's no link to you as a writer, because you don't have a publishing company. You're not registered as a songwriter. You don't have a publisher. You don't have a publishing administrator. You don't have anything on the composition side. Then the royalties from your compositions that are generated, they will go to what's called a black box. And typically, as it's been explained to me, those royalties that are in the black box are then divided up based on market share. So all the unpaid royalties are being generated based on the companies that generate the most amount of money or have the largest portion or control the largest portion in whatever field that is. So that's why it's super important here to always think about having a publisher. It's easy to be like, oh, I don't want a publisher, I could do this myself, but you deserve to get every penny that you make, right? Whether it's $1 million, $100, 10 cents, whatever it may be. And sometimes 100% of nothing is nothing. So you can keep everything 100%, but if you're not registering things correctly, things are going unclaimed, then you may not get those royalties, and that could go to the black box. That's funny, yeah. Delaware is notorious for people setting up, corps and things like that. The crypto companies are registered in is that Wyoming or Texas. Texas hella good for registering companies. I have an LLC, and honestly, y'all, everything he is saying is correct. But I appreciate that. You co-signing that. Kyle not giving a hands-on experience. When's the company Christmas party, and are we invited? Well, I mean, as far as the Christmas party goes, we're waiting on you all. So, I am. I heard that all the producers was having a Christmas party, so I'm waiting on my invite. Also, I'm waiting on my Thanksgiving invite too. So make sure y'all post them plates. I want to see them plates tomorrow, so I can know who crib I need to pull up to and see what I'm gonna get. Right. That's where the BeatStars collects your royalties if you're not fully licensed. So I guess you're talking about. I guess you're talking about BeatStars publishing. So yeah. So like for example, when you're putting your stuff out on Spotify, Apple Music, and you're generating royalties, what BeatStars publishing does is we basically make sure, and I'm saying our music team, because they do such a great job. They in collaboration with Sony Music Publishing, they basically make sure that every time those sound recordings on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Tidal, any of the DSPs, they get played, that you're not only getting paid on the sound recording side, but you're also getting paid your royalties, right? And what your compositional royalties. So that's mechanical royalties, That's performance royalties, which are songwriting royalties and your publishing royalties. And then if you get a sync in, they make sure that they properly get that stuff cleared and make sure that you're getting paid. So that's typically what we're doing. Can you explain the process of getting an LLC? Great question. So for LLC, and I'll read this too. This is in you all's learning guide. Articles of organization can be documented and filed with the state. So whatever state you're in, or like they talked about, whatever state it makes sense. These articles establish the rights, powers, duties, liabilities, and obligations of each member of the LLC. Other information included on these documents, they just basically have your LLCs, the name of the registered agent, and just why you're doing business. So, excuse me, typically what you're doing is you're going to your company site. And when you're doing this, just make sure that the site that you're using has .gov on the end, because a lot of times there's these sites that you can go in and try to register LLC and they'll just take your money. They're not really, or they'll be charging you an enormous fee on top of the filing fee. There's no reason why you should pay $1,000 to register an LLC or corporation, unless there's something specific that you're doing and you got to get legal advice. But just to start a standard business, you can actually go online and do it yourself. And there's help on there to tell you how to do it. So basically, let's just say, for example, you're in Georgia. What I would do is just type in register a LLC Georgia business website. And what you'll see is gabusiness.gov. Now you're gonna have to scroll down a little bit, but then you go in there, you say, I want to do an LLC, and it'll just ask you all this information. And what you're gonna do is, and it's the same thing with a corporation, they want you to pick your name. So you basically have to find your name for your LLC. And typically you'll just search, and once you see that name is available, then you're able to use that name to start your LLC. Now for LLCs, typically, whatever your name, let's just say my name is Attorney Kyle. So to start an LLC, it'll be Attorney Kyle Limited Liability Company, or it'll be Attorney Kyle LLC. And if I want to start a corporation, typically it'll be Attorney Kyle Inc., Attorney Kyle Incorporated, or Attorney Kyle Corp. So typically it's really up to you, but you know that's how it really works when you're talking about registration. Let me see. And I'm waiting on y'all for the food and everything. I still ain't seen that. So, okay. The next thing we're gonna talk about is what are the key things that you need once you are setting up your entity. So I'm actually currently in a process right now, and I'll give y'all a story before we get out of here. I'm currently in the process right now of setting up what's called an S corp, right? Just for a friend, they just want to help. And typically when you're starting a corporation or LLC, these are the things you need, right? You're gonna need what's called an EIN number. I like to tell people this is free, right? You should not be going online and paying into a website that's saying pay $30, $40 to get an EIN number. EIN numbers are free. They're given out basically by the IRS, and I don't know if you're in another country, but typically these EIN numbers or employer identification numbers, basically these numbers are given out for free. You register, you tell them the name of your business, and at that point, that's the number you use. So when you're filing taxes, all of that stuff can be referenced back to your individual entity. So like say, for example, if you got 5 different entities, each entity will have its own EIN number. And why this is important is because when you're going to the bank, when you go and you're trying to set up a business banking account, they're going to say, hey, can you give me the name of your LLC? Let me look up to see if it's filed properly and if it's active and in good standing. And then can you give me your EIN number? So once you have those things, typically what you can do then, you can go in and you can get your bank account, and now you can run everything to that bank account. So we talked about EIN, we touched on the bank account, but let me explain why that's important. So again, the LLC or the corporation, what it does is it sets the difference and it separates you from the business, right? But the reason why it's important to have a bank account is because you want to make sure that all of your personal money that you make over here and all the stuff you're doing in business, in the music business, in production, as an artist, if you start a label, if you got sync deals, brand deals, publishing, distribution, merch, touring, all of that money is going into these business accounts, because at the point when you start mixing the money, it's basically like, wait, you're not even really using this LLC properly, right? So it's super important that you have that business account, right, so that you can keep everything separate. But another cool thing about the business account is, in order to start getting financing, like say you got a great idea, nobody will invest in your idea, right? But you're doing well, like you have a business that's generating income. You're using your your business LLC, right? You having all this money come in. People see like, okay, he's making $10,000 here, $5,000. Okay, I see all his beat sales. Okay, I see all of his producer placements. Okay, I see where you got a wire from this. Fine. Now what you can do is you can leverage the fact that you're actually a fully functioning and running business in order to make sure you can get a business like lines of credit, right? Um, and you can have, and also you can show investors like, this is my business account. This is how we're spending. This is how we're doing everything. And as I think it was Bufo that said, now you can use that information and provide it to your financial advisor or your CPA or whoever it may be, to make sure that you're having a functionally running business. So really the main things that you want to have and you want to think about is having an EIN number, right? Super important. Having a bank account. I put 3 bullet points here. Protection, right? Protecting you makes you look more professional, so people can pay you, right? They can invoice my LLC, right? Invoice my corporation. Like that's so cool to me. Like when I see people, and it be young people too. Like, man, send an invoice to my LLC. Man, send an invoice to my corporation. That's just so impressive to me, because it's showing me that they're thinking as a business and they're thinking about going further than where they're at. And they're preparing this, right? Business banking usually comes with line of credit for a company, and this can be used in the event of emergency. Or, for example, if you need to print up, you got an order of 50,000, t-shirts randomly because you just was on the biggest single in the world, and now you need a line of credit. Because you got this business entity running and it's set up properly, you can get a line of credit from the bank. So that's some of the key things to think about. And then I would say the last thing is a DBA, right? And typically you can go online and look to see how to file this, but DBAs are doing business as. So for example, say I have what's called Attorney Cal LLC, but I just want to be known as Attorney Cal. I can go in and I can have my LLC, which still protects me, but instead of it just being like a sole proprietorship, I can have it where I have a DBA, so doing business as. And now at that point, what's happening is I'm protected, because I just want you to know, like when I'm doing business, just call me Attorney Cal. You don't have to say the whole thing, right? You can if you want to, but you could just say Attorney Cal instead of Attorney Cal LLC. So those are really the key things you're thinking about. EIN, so you can make sure all your tax stuff is handled properly and that you're classified right in your business entity. Bank account, because you want to not only make sure that you're getting all this money and you're keeping it separate from your personal money, but that you're, making sure that you're prepared and professional, so people can see like, okay, they own their business. And also you're building that, that name with the bank or whoever you're working with, just in case you need to get business financing or whatever that may be. That's super important. And the last thing, that I want to talk about and touch on is what are the key things you need? No, I'm sorry. Things to avoid. I was reading one of you all's question. Things to avoid with your business entity. My biggest advice for people is treat these business entities as if they're you. They're a reflection of you. They're a reflection of where you're trying to go. So don't just use your business entity to do illegal stuff, right? Don't do that. That's wrong. Use your business entity as, it's called a legal entity for a reason, right? Use it to do what's right. Use it to follow the law, because just because you have a business entity doesn't mean that you can't go to jail, or you won't be caught up for doing illegal stuff. Or just because you have a business entity doesn't mean you can sign your business entity on a contract and then not do it. Because typically when you're signing on that contract, what happens is people typically include they're smart, what's called a letter of inducement, which means not only is this business entity liable, right? But if you act like you don't want to perform as your business entity, then people can say, all right, you signed this letter of inducement. We need more from you. So make sure you're doing everything right. Make sure you're using a business entity, whether it be an LLC or corporation or whatever you decide, based on the law in your state. Don't be using it improperly, because what happens is it's called piercing the corporate veil. I mean, that applies to corporations. So say you just got a corporation, but you're not using that as a corporation, right? You're not separating the money, you're not using it legally like we just talked about. That the corporate veil, or what keeps you protected, or what creates that invisible separation, can be pierced, and that everything that you're trying to do to protect yourself, now even though you have a corporation or LLC, they can get to your personal assets. So it's super important that when you're doing that and you're using these LLCs, corporations, and these business entities, you're getting that proper legal advice, right? And you're making sure that you're using these things, these properly. Let's see what questions we got. Let's see. What is the difference between the LLC and the S corp? Good question. Great question. So LLC, limited liability company. Typically, like we said, we're having managers. I'm talking about people that's owning the thing, right? You're having managers. You're having member managers. This is an example. Excuse me. Example. Managers, member managers, and you having members. With S corps is basically a corporation, right? But with that corporation, instead of it being a C corp typically is what you think of as a large corporation, has so many shareholders. Think about it as being a corporation where that's on for the stock market, like that's a huge corporation. A C corp, basically what's happening is that C corp is being taxed on all the money that it makes, right? And then it's also being taxed when the money is paid out to the shareholders, right? So that's typically how a C corp works. With an S corp, essentially, when you create that S corp, the S corp, there's no taxation, double taxation. So all of the money that's made when you have an S corp is passed through that corporation right down to the people that own shares, and they're taxed on whatever money that they have, right, that they've made, versus them being taxed on all the money that the S corp is made, and then they're being taxed on the money that they're paid out. So that's really the difference. The LLC has member managers, and members. S corp is basically what's like a pass-through thing. So it's essentially acting the same way as an LLC. One of the key distinctions for the LLC, though, is that the S corp. With the S corp, you have to make sure that there's no more than 100 shareholders, and also you have to be in the U.S. Can't be doing like international banking. It's just there are certain restrictions to having an S corp. If you don't have an S corp, then you'll have to basically if you don't qualify, you'll have to have a C corp. We can go to the next slide. If I'm incorporated, can you break down how shares are distributed within a company, and how we structure it for music? This is really great question. So for your corporation, typically you can really create how many shares you want when you start a corporation. You can say, look, we're just gonna have 100 shares, right? We'll have 1,000,000 shares, right? And we can have 10 million shares. Those shares, the value of those shares is just going to be based on the value of the business, right? So if the business is only worth 10,000, then you divide that 10,000 by how many shares you have, and then each share will be worth that particular amount. So, for example, the reason why shares come in and why they're important is, like, say, for example, you're a producer, and you want to start a music company, whether it be, let's say, a record label, and you like, man, I'm gonna start a corporation. With the corporation, why it's cool is because you can basically create a corporation, have a certain amount of shares, and then based on that, you can say, look, these shares are worth $100,000. I have 100,000 shares, they're worth $100,000, and I'm willing to sell a certain amount of my shares as an investment, right? So let's just say you need $25,000. You can say, look, I'm gonna sell 25% of my shares. I'll still own, 75%, or let's just say you say I want to sell 50,000, I need 50,000. You can say, look, I'm gonna sell 50,000, 50,000 shares or $50,000 worth of shares. I'll still retain 50% of my company. You own the other half. And typically, why that's important is when people are investing in your company, um, you're giving them assets like shares, which is equity in it. And it's just a way to identify. Shares are just ways to identify who owns what. Another thing that I should have mentioned with the S corp is you can only have one class of shares, right? So typically, and I'm not trying to get too complex here, but typically, with a lot of times, what you see in companies have what's called preferred shares. So these are like the best shares. They have like class A shares, class B shares, and it just goes on down, right? So that's in the C corp. So if y'all don't know if y'all heard of a company called Berkshire Hathaway, they have shares that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? But those shares come with a certain level of voting rights. They also have shares that are cheaper, like hundreds of dollars, but those shares come with different rights. So if you have a C corp, you can have all these different levels of shares and really get complex. And these are benefits for people investing a certain amount of money. Now, when you have an S corp, you can only have one class of shares, meaning all of these shares are the same type, and typically they're going to be valued at the same amount. Let's see, do we got any other question? Class E shares, yeah. Okay, so yeah, for sure. That was a really, really great question. So let's wrap up here and talk about our future topics. I think the hottest topic we're gonna have is the next one. Protecting your art by properly using loops. Man, we need to. I'm gonna pull some of this language from all of these different sites, because I'm seeing a lot of times with using loops, producers using, just all of these different things in the industry. When you're using something that has a license attached to it, you have to make sure you're using it based on that license or based on terms of service, because if you're not, you could not have ownership in what you think you got ownership, or you could have legal issues later down the road. So we're going to talk about that. Make sure you invite people, because I'm just seeing this problem pop up more and more, and I just want to make sure that our community is educated on it, because it's so important and it's so critical to moving up. Protecting your intellectual property, we're going to talk about the registration process, and we'll have somebody hopefully from Cosign come in. I kind of reached out to them, they reached out, and I reached back to say, hey, come talk to our people, right? So y'all can pick their brain and ask questions. Proper website legal, right? Okay, you got your pro page and you got all these different things set up. You got your merch site going. You got, a separate site for when you drop music, that you're putting out. But do you have terms of service, right? Do you have privacy policy? What's your artwork looking like, right? Is this artwork licensed, or is it, are you using artwork that's unlicensed? Do you have a DMCA policy where people can reach out to you in the event that they feel like some of their work or a loop that you use that you got from somebody that got it from somebody else is not proper? So we'll talk about that. Then we're going to talk about mechanical royalties. There are a lot of misconceptions about mechanical royalties, how they're paid, when they're paid, what they're paid, like what are they, right? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about sync, right? Like synchronization. Like, what does a sync deal look like? How will I know if it's real? How will I know if it's fake? What should I be asking for? I just learned something about sync the other day, which was really cool. So we'll talk about that. We could have another copyright registration with Cosign, but we'll see. We'll be talking about non-interactive and interactive streaming. That's the difference between lean-in streaming, where you're going in and you're selecting the song that you want to hear, versus you're going to Pandora and they're choosing. How does this work? How does this differ? And how does it affect you as an artist, a performer, or a songwriter, and how you get paid, right? And the last thing is we're going to talk a little bit about properly protecting your art properly with using artwork. I see that so much where you have people that's using artwork that may not belong to them or may belong to them, and they're not really aware of, like, okay, how do I properly use artwork or put an artist on as my cover? Like, what do I need to do? So we'll jump into that. And again, the overall purpose of all of this is to make sure that all the hard work that you all put in, you're protecting that art, and that when you're doing stuff on the back end, it's not hindering how much ownership or the level of success that you'll have later on, because somebody just mad and they like, nope, you used my loop. Nope, that's my copyright. Nope, you didn't have privacy policy. Nope, you ain't getting no mechanical royalties. Nope, they only paying you on the sync side for the master, but you're supposed to get something on the publishing side. Nope, you're not getting paid the same thing you're getting for non-interactive, interactive streaming. Nope, I'm suing you because you used my artwork on your page and you didn't have a license. So that's all what we're trying to do, is just make sure that you all are educated. You got a place to ask questions, and that you can always have these videos so you can go back and be like, man, I remember we talked about Class E shares. So let me see what we talked about. But yeah, we can go to the last slide and get out of here. Yeah, so as always, if you got questions, make sure you hit me up at Attorney Kyle. Most definitely, because I look forward to hearing from you all and just picking my brain. I learned from my community director, Mike Trampy, how to like kind of use voice notes. He uses those, and I think it's really cool. So like, if you got a question, just voice note me. Like, I'll voice note you back, or I'll type back, whatever you want to do. If you want to set up a call, I have office hours from Friday to 12 to 2. That's just my time period. So definitely reach out at Attorney Kyle on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, BeatStars, whatever it is, just hit me up. Last question. Hey man, how do you know if BeatStars is planning to add master clause in the contract? A master clause in the contract. Definitely. I'll look into that for you. We're always open and thinking about different things to beef up the templates. But I'll definitely look into that, and then definitely hit me in the DMs and kind of clarify more too, like what you hope to see or what you need, and we could talk more about it and see how we can help you. Can you tell us about tax write-off? So unfortunately, I'm not a tax professional, but I hope to be able to bring someone on to talk a little bit about taxes, because that is coming up, and that's important for all you all who are making all this money. So most definitely. I really appreciate you all tuning in, being very attentive, asking great questions. As I always say, your intellectual property is no different than a piece of real estate. If you got 1,000 pieces of real estate, making $1,000 a month, that's $1 million. So if you got 1,000 beats, if you got 1,000 songs, if you got a catalog, and those 1,000 are making 1,000, that's also $1 million, right? So let's make sure that no matter what we're doing, we're protecting our intellectual property, treating it as real estate, treating our intellectual property, as what it is and what it will be, and not just using it, for, like it doesn't matter, because it's super important. It's so valuable, and yeah, most definitely. So with that being said, if you all have any questions, make sure you follow me. Hit me at Attorney Kyle if y'all want to talk more about this. Have a happy holidays. Definitely be safe, and peace.